roll too. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome to the Finance Committee meeting of the Marin Wildfire Prevention Authority for Monday, March 17th. It is 10:01 a.m. Starting with Director Curse,
Here.
Director Finn, Director White, Chief Pomey,
Here.
Dan Schwartz, and let the minutes reflect that currently Director Goins and Director Jones are not present with us this morning. We do have a quorum.
Great. Thank you very much. At this time, do we have any agenda adjustments?
Yes, staff would request to move to discussion item 8 prior to the action items because that discussion item kind of helps inform the rest of the meeting.
Great. Any questions, concerns? Perfect. Let's go ahead and move that item to the beginning. At this time, do we have any requests for public expression for items that are not on the agenda?
And ma'am, there are no hands for public comment at this time.
Great. Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the executive officer's report.
I'll be super brief since we had an executive committee meeting last week and we'll have a board meeting later this week. One of the big things that's generating a lot of conversation is the recent governor's executive order that would suspend certain aspects of CEQA, certain aspects of the coastal zone. And what's important for us to remember is that our mission statement says that we will be ecologically sound, and we've worked hard to develop trust with our environmental stakeholders. We will continue to maintain that trust. However, if there are procedural impediments for us to get projects onto the ground quickly, and or there can be cost savings by using the exemptions so that we can get more work done, then that's when we will exercise those exemptions, but we won't drop back on the environmental compliance that we are conducting. We're just going to speed up our process to get to projects on the ground. And then one final reminder, well, actually, Thursday will be one final reminder. We have this Climate and Wildfire Institute and the Wildfire and Forest Resilience Task Force meetings later this month. I hope you've all received your VIP invites and look forward to seeing you all there.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the consent calendar. We have one item. Any questions? Any public comment on it's just the minutes from the last meeting?
Ma'am, there are no hands at this time.
Move to approve.
There's a second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we're all here. All right, good. Moving on to, I guess we're moving up the discussion item at this point.
Correct.
Okay.
So as stated in the staff report, NBS is who works with us for our tax levy and works with the county. Each year they give us a predicted revenue for 20. Then this one that we have here is for our 24-25 year, and so we use that as our baseline. This what our revenue was, and then what we would add the CPI to project next year's revenue. To show you how accurate that process is, this year we were 1.5% off on our projected revenue. Last year we were under 1% off on our projected revenue. So it's a tried and true method. And unsurprisingly, the percentages of revenue per zone did not change. So 26% for Novato, 27 for San Rafael, 23 for the Ross Valley or Central Marin, 18 for Southern Marin, and 6% are our revenue totals for West Marin. Any questions?
Nope. All right. Sounds good. All right, moving on to our action items. So as Mark talked about, we start with the tax rate adjustment.
And as per the tax ordinance, we can have up to a 3% cost of living adjustment based on the February to February CPI, which came out on March 12th at 2.7%. And we're recommending that we do adjust our tax rate by 2.7% because of the inflation and cost of work to get these projects done. As you remember, the first year of our existence, we chose not to execute that because we had so much unspent. But now that we have gotten our stride and we're actually executing projects and exceeding our revenue purposefully so we can spend down that first year's unspent, we feel that the 2.7% adjustment is appropriate.
Okay. And I didn't call for public comment on the discussion item, so we'll just open up if anyone has public comment on either the discussion item or on this item as they're both related?
Currently, there are no attendees for the meeting.
Okay, so that's good to know. All right. Um, any questions from the board on this item?
Questions, I just think it's fair. No, 2.7%.
Use your mic, please.
I think it's a fair amount.
Any other questions? Great.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Nope. So we have we have a motion. Is there a second?
I move for approval.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right. All right. Good. So that now leads right into the budget.
Leads right into the budget. So I'll do a quick screen share. So, and I can zoom in a little bit more to make it easier to read. As per previous years when we presented, we wanted the finance committee asked for the previous fiscal year's actual, the preliminary, and then what the total budget ended up being. So for comparisons. And then for this year, we are estimating a $22.6 million revenue from the tax ordinance, estimating $200,000 in interest for our bank accounts. As we scroll through, you'll see that sets after we take the 10% of admin out of the core, that'll give us a $12 million, $300,000 core budget. You'll notice that none of the core projects are worked out yet. That's because we're in the work plan process, and that was what will come to you in May. As we scroll down, you'll see that for the DSpace and the local programs, it's a 4.5 million for disbursement to our member agencies, and then disperse those prorated to their population. And as you'll notice on the DSpace, there's no longer the abatement holdback as per the new JPA. And then the framework for our administrative budget is we have a preliminary number from Southern Marin Fire for providing our financial and administrative services. We did a 3% cost of living adjustment for legal services, appropriate cost of living adjustment for the personnel, and then split between services and supplies and professional services for the remainder. And down here, the grant revenue is going to be probably minimal this year as we've exhausted the Greater Ross Valley Shaded Fuel Break Grant, and we are getting close to exhausting the Greater Nevada Shaded Fuel Break Grant, which are good things. And we are applying for a couple of other grants this year, one for the San Rafael Santa Selma Fuel Reduction Zone and also for our Community Wildfire Protection Plan. But those will happen midstream. We'll get notification midstream through the budget year. And with that, I can take any questions.
Any questions, please?
Chief, you answered a question that I had, which has to do with the increase in the legal services budget. We're up, or without the rollover, we would have been increasing it by $22,000, right, $24,000. And I thought that might be attributable to, for example, what you mentioned in your executive officer report, which is like increased environmental compliance cost, those sorts of things. But instead, you've just built in an inflation adjustment for the fees. On that note, I just want to be sensitive, not to the quality of the services we're getting. Well, I am sensitive to that, and I'm thrilled with them. But I'm always hopeful that in the long term, the number of environmental legal costs will trend down somehow as we become more adept at implementing projects, don't need to reinvent the wheel each time. But of course, we can't control what opponents of the projector might wish to do. So I know the outside law firms that we do use are extremely valuable in their expertise, but it would be nice if in the long term we could begin to see that taper down a little bit.
Totally agree. But I do want to point out that we have two separate budget items. We have the legal services, and then I'm going to scroll up, and that is to our environmental compliance budget is up here in the core. And that's actually where we have seen those exact efficiencies that you're talking about, and the cost of implementing new projects has dropped. So we are seeing a drop in environmental compliance in the core budget.
Thank you. Other questions? just have a question around the alerts and notifications. Can you just remind us around that one?
Yes, so for the current fiscal year that we are in now, we are paying back the previous fiscal year, and so that's why you see the bracketed numbers there. That because we did not budget for the increase for the subscription of Genesis Protect, which is the alert and notifications, and then we added Ladris AI. So that's why we are over budget, so to speak, in that for this current fiscal year. But now that 208,000 is both the Genesis and the Ladris, and now we're flush. We won't have to pay back a previous fiscal year.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions, comments, please?
Following on Director Kurtz's question, have we thought any further about the possibility of trying to recover some of our costs with Ladris and Genesis by sharing the intellectual property ownership or commercializing the product somehow, since it's being built kind of on our nickel?
Actually, for those items, those weren't built on our nickel, the fire side and the dynamic risk assessment, which is part of, if you look down and you see both the defensible space and metrics development tracking, that's where we are looking due to our intellectual property to work out agreements for licensing fees that can come back into Marin Wildfire.
My mistake. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Other questions, comments? No? Okay, so, if there's no other, do we have a motion? This is to move this forward for our, annual budgeting planning, and then this will go to ops.
It'll go to the board for approval and then to ops for the build out the core
Right,
programs
so this is our recommendation to move this forward.
And then it comes back to this body.
in May, the first week of May,
Mhm.
first or second week of May, it'll come back.
To approve?
Oh, we went off.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. And do we have any public comment? Do we have anyone in attendance this time?
There are currently no hands for comment.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So is that the end of the meeting?
No, we have just the policy review.
Okay, financial policy review. Yes, thank you.
And this is just good practice. We established these policies back in 2020 and 2021. It was an ad hoc subcommittee of the Finance Committee that originally drafted these, the vast majority of them. The Finance Committee gave staff the direction to make appropriate adjustments and bring back to the Finance Committee. They were all included in the packet. I'm not sure how much discussion is required on anyone, but I do think it is worth me mentioning the why behind a change that we have in the fund disbursement policy. And that is, we want to make sure that Measure C dollars are executed or put to work and not sitting in bank accounts. And we have a few of our member agencies that are approaching a year's or more worth of revenue that they receive from DSpace and local. And we also had a request that for larger agencies that can afford it to have a restricted reserve should something untoward happen, and they would be able to fall back onto the restricted reserve. Well, Marin Wildfire has a restricted reserve of 15%, and so it seemed to make sense for the larger entities that to allow them to create a restricted reserve would make sense, especially if it was 15% and in alignment with our policies. But the other portion of it was, instead of having member agencies sit on at least a year's worth of revenue for 2 years, would be not really exercising the tax dollars and getting projects done. So for what we consider at Marin Wildfire larger entities, and we work this out through our governance policy with the board, any member agency that's 4% of the population or greater is considered a large entity. And so what we recommend is that if a member agency has not expended a year's worth of revenue for 2 years, then the board could hold back a future disbursement of local and put that into the core projects for that zone. That way we can get these dollars at work. The next question you're probably going to ask is, do we have any entities that would fall within that criteria right now? No, we're at about people are at about 90, a couple of entities are at about 97, 98% of that threshold. So no, right now that wouldn't impact anybody, but I think it gives people motivation to get work done on the ground.
Right. Appreciate that. Questions?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think where a little deeper dive is going to have to take place, though, is where those dollars are getting spent by the individual agencies, both D-Space and local, because I think there's a pretty wide discrepancy or difference in where those dollars are spent. And I'll use Kentfield as an example. Kentfield took the approach of we are only using 10% of our local and D space for any administrative staff, vehicles, all of that. We're keeping the remaining portion of those funds for shovel-ready projects. Get the work done. Other agencies aren't doing that. You can see across the board where, you have vehicles, you have staff, you have all this, maybe it's defensible space and more inspections or advisors, and you're truly spending the money on people and you're not spending the money actually on the projects. So I, I do have a little bit of, concern there that if all of a sudden we're going to start handicapping the smaller agencies that are maybe keeping those monies for that large fuel break that's going to be coming through, the backside of Kentfield, and saying, well, sorry, you only have 1 year's worth when our portion is very small. So that's just a concern I have moving forward with this type of language in the policy.
Well, one thing about your concern about the 10% is that in the latest revision of the JPA, it clarifies that no agency can spend more than 10% of their local or 10% of their D space on administrative services. So that is clarified. Vehicles and operational personnel, though, are not considered part of that administrative fee because when it comes to D space, it takes employees to get the D space work done. So that, but that's why as far as the 1 year aspect or the carrying 1 year revenue for 2 years, that's why we applied it only to the large entities. So any entity that has less than 4% of population, which Kentfield does, then that stipulation doesn't apply to you.
I apologize that I thought it was the actual reverse. Anyone smaller than the
No, it's
smaller
it's for the entities that are large.
I gotcha. Okay.
Right. Any other questions? Please.
Also,
Other one? No.
Pete, just to make clear, the money's not being forfeited if it's unspent. It's going back into the pot that is going to be used in that same local area.
Yes, it would stay. And not to call any one agency out, but
Right.
I have a San Rafael representative here. Let's say it is San Rafael that we would say, okay, you guys have been sitting on a year's worth of revenue for 2 years. Then that money would be pushed into a San Rafael zone projects. And it would be the San Rafael zone that determines, all right, well, we wanted to go towards this project.
Would a local agency need to consent to this policy modification?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So then just a clarifying question, because I think you said core. So it's not core, it's by zone.
Right.
Okay. I think that was too.
By zone, core zone. Yes. Yes. Thank you, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah. No, within that zone. No, within that zone. Yeah.
Great. Good. Any other comments, questions? No? Okay. Any of the other items? That was a lot of the other changes are, I sort of called them housekeeping items along the way. But these will come back to the board as well.
Correct. And well, we were not able to dig into the procurement policy, and we know that there are going to need to be changes into procurement. So anticipate seeing that in May.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay.
1211, the grant application, that's MWPA applying for
Correct.
grants, not our internal grant program.
No.
Any other items? All right. And you'd like a motion to move this forward to the board?
Correct.
What?
So moved.
Was there?
I'll second, but I do have just one additional comment. So on policy 1211, page 2, H and I, there's just some clerical things that probably need to be addressed.
we'll take care of that before we move it to the board.
Great, thank you. All right, going once, going twice, all in favor?
I-
Oh,
Aye.
all right, and I'm assuming no public comment.
Still no attendees.
It's no attending. Okay, there we go. That's why there's no public comment. All right, good. All right, and I think that now I think we've covered
Now we're at any agenda, future agenda.
future agenda items. Is there anything else we'd like to bring in? Mark, can you sort of not necessarily related to a future agenda item, but speak to the timing that happens from now. This was a big piece because now the budget has been identified. What happens now to May and June when we start and the different meetings? Because this is when it comes back to the finance committee and then back to the board of what we're going to be approving and being presented with. Maybe you could just sort of lay out that roadway.
So I'll actually backtrack a little bit. So 2 months ago, we made an assumption of when we were talking to the ATC and ops that there would be a 2% cost of living adjustment. We were going on a conservative side. We'd rather go at 2% and then go up if it happened. And so as they started to shape some of their projects, because they're already starting to do that, they were based on those revenue numbers. And now that we have the 2.7%, and we made the assumption that the board would approve that 2.7, they're starting to shape their projects based on those budgets. And so the core projects have been mostly outlined. The JPA-wide core projects have been mostly outlined. Now the member agencies are starting to make the individual zone core projects, as well as the proposals for local and DSpace. And that'll happen over the next several months. And that's where we encourage our board members to have some conversations with their folks to see how things are shaping up. There will be a couple of meetings in April of both the ATC, which are non-public meetings now, and then the operations committee to finalize those. And then the last operations committee meeting will be the first week of May, where they will wrap up the core budget. Then we will come back to the finance committee the second week of May for you to approve the final budget. And then we go to the board the third week of May for final approval.
Great. So as Mark mentioned, we mentioned this at the last board meeting, we're really recommending that you, as all the directors, meet with their ATC rep, their ops rep, so there's no surprises. So by the time it comes to May, there's no surprises in terms of your understanding of what you're looking at in terms of that zone, and the work that's going to be happening and how the budget's going to be, looking to be allocated. So if you can continue, maybe, and then also, as Mark was saying, the meetings some are publics, all of them are, they're recorded. You can watch and hear what's happening. So to definitely be engaged in that, at that level. Is there anything else?
That's it for me.
If I could I just salute Chief Brown and his team. This is our 5th budget. It's a milestone budget for us. And I want to acknowledge that having a budget is almost less important than being able to modify your budget when necessary. And I think we've successfully done that over the past 5 years. So thank you.
Not to correct a board member, but it's actually our 6th.
You're right. We've adopted 5, and we've got 6 hasn't been adopted yet. So I said 5 only.
Okay.
You knew. All right. Anything else from anyone? I'm trying to expand because I'm getting this reputation that my meetings are really short. So, all right. If there's nothing else, we are adjourned.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.